God.
I think coming from the non-musician side of things, for me at least, it's nice to see the humanity. Like the moments of, oh, this person isn't perfect.
And I think there's a softer boundary between non-musical people and musical people.
Yeah, that maybe.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's certainly people that, like, just genetically, like, they just can't perceive pitch in the same way, or they just, something in their brain. Like, in the same, what's it called, aphantasia? There are some people that just don't visualize pictures in their head. Yeah. It's
not wholly, but mostly.
But yeah, it's a myth that everybody has, like, an internal monologue, or everybody has an internal movie they can see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's, and actually, you know, a lot of my community in Seattle is very into modular synthesis, which is generating sound but without a musical intent. It's just kind of the iterative process of like making textures and patterns.
Okay.
And that's kind of, it's sort of in that border town between music and, you know, sort of avant-garde kind of soundscape. But it's still, it kind of stimulates that same sort of exploratory thing that I feel when I play an instrument.
Well, and a lot of that too, where you've got where all music really is, when you get down to it, is just noise that's been put into patterns, right? And whether they're like tonal patterns or whether they're rhythmic patterns, it's like you can recognize something as being music, as being this belongs to the category of music, as opposed to just ambient sound.
Yeah, and across cultures there are certain commonalities. Like we sort of agree on like coming back to the chord where you started a song, like that feels comforting. But our idea of like what the comfortable journey is to get back to that starting point is different. And like how many little chunks we break a sound wave into, like how we subdivide that math is different. Like there's sort of whole steps and half steps in Western music, but other scales have quarter steps, you know, and little sort of microtones.
Which is super cool.
It's very cool.
And also you can find like, they've got, I think, a bone or a very old whistle or a flute or something that has the same, they're not even sure it's the product of Homo sapien. It might be like a Neanderthal artifact, and it has the same tonal scale as we still use in Western music. And it's just like, we've been doing these sounds for so long, and other cultures have been doing their sounds for so long.
Absolutely. And
I love it.
Our records of, like the fossil record of instruments is older than the fossil record of language. We were probably making musical sound before we were making like phonetic sounds.
Which makes sense. Like
Yeah. And it probably, that musical part of our brain as it evolved is what allowed us to develop, you know, tonal recognition in our languages.
There's even the presence of whistling within language as part of the lingual structure, and it tends to crop up in places where the whistle will carry further, like in jungle settings. I think is one place, and then like the yodeling and stuff that people do in other places, like calling out across mountains. So like your geography informs some of how you use music in language, which is so cool.
Yeah. That persists to this day. Like David Byrne did a TED talk about how the architecture of venues and sort of what's available, what spaces are available for making music in, shapes what the music sounds like. Which is like, you know, why symphonic music sounds the way it does, is because it's designed to fill one of those big proscenium spaces. And it's why, like, Billie Eilish now sounds like she does, because everybody listens to music very close in headphones, so she can get very close to the mic and put all these weird little details across the entire, you know, spectrum of sound, because it can all be perceived in, like, a private setting.
Yeah,
right?
Which would not work on...
Yeah, and, like, the Phil Spector sort of wall of sound. Like, I can't imagine listening to Billie Eilish in a wall full of speakers.
Yeah.
Sounds like getting breathed on.
It'd be a hell of a thing to go to a concert where it's like 50,000 people in a stadium, and it's like, okay, we've all given you headphones so that you can enjoy the music. But it's the only way.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Beatles Cirque du Soleil show does that.
Oh, do they? That's right.
Yeah, they have speakers, stereo speakers in your, like an IMAX theater, in your chair.
Nice. That's cool. I like that. Funny thing. So the my favorite illustration of what you guys are talking about too is Bobby McFerrin's TED Talk, where it was really just his entertainment talk that he did, where he demonstrates to people, it's like, you are all musicians and you just don't know it. And I'm going to demonstrate to you how you're a musician. We're going to talk about the pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
And the moment when he's like, so if you have somebody standing, like he did this where he was standing up.
You're gonna have, you gotta take off your guitar if you're gonna demonstrate.
I can't do the thing, but he's like, we're gonna call this. That's dun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like so dun, and then I think it's he would like dun, and he's like, now if I go over here, dun, everyone got the note. He's like, so we go dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
And the whole audience, when they saw him jump, all did the same sound.
Yeah.
And then they all started laughing because they realized, they're like, oh wow. And then he did that. He did 5. He only did was just 5 notes, but they all knew them. And it's like, that's wired into your brain. You just know what it's going to be. You know what the
Scale.
Not the scale.
Note.
The interval. You know the interval.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's very weird because none of our musical instruments these days are pentatonic in nature.
Yeah.
Right?
But that emerges from how you subdivide. Leonard Bernstein, I believe, did a series of lectures at, I think via Harvard. It was pointed at children, basically, how to explain the fundamentals of not just music, but of sound to children. And so he whacked like a middle C on the piano and went, there's middle C, which, wait, I think, what am I doing? I don't know if I can hit middle C on this. Like clong, you can hear middle C.
Yeah.
But then in there's also G, you can hear G in there. And so that's kind of, there's C and then C, that's the octave and the octave. And then there's the 5th, that's just kind of there in the tone. And then if you go from G and the octave of G, then if you just kind of break down the one foundational note, you can get all 12 notes in the scale just from like hopping sort of sensible, predictable intervals.
Right.